Hello everyone. If you've been listening to or watching my videos about my life, then this is the next episode in a long line of, what can I call them? Probably mishaps, ill-judged relationships that I should have got out probably in the very first week or so. Maybe not, but you know how it goes. You meet somebody, they are nice to you, you think, oh, that's amazing. And for a while, you take all that they're saying as the truth until it's not. If that would interest you, listen. For the first 3 years following my disastrous marriage to the man that I loaned all the money to and never got paid a penny back, I was busy. The first year afterwards, I wasn't so much busy, but I was trying to cope with depression. What I think was depression, I just couldn't move. It was like being in a bowl of molasses and unable to put one foot in front of the other. The second year, I had started to recover. I had started to mend my home, get it ready for sale, and also seek a divorce. He was a very slippery customer. I had to find out where he was. So that took up an entire year. And the third year, I was gradually, slowly, bit by bit, getting over the previous 6 years actually. It was a long, laborious task, acknowledging my role in the whole, what can I call it, disastrous episode, because I have to take responsibility for ignoring my own intuition. I could see what was going on, and yet I could be argued out of doing what I knew would be right. I was a fool, and they do say a fool and their money are soon parted. Well, that was actually true. I have to acknowledge that. 3 years had gone past since the beginning of that time, and I did feel a little stronger. I had done the NLP course, and that made me not so vulnerable. Later on, you're going to think, yeah, right, Imogen. But I did think that I was a little stronger. I certainly wasn't carrying around all the rubbish from my childhood, from my first marriage, the destructive criticism I constantly got, all of that. I wasn't any longer carrying that around. So I felt better equipped to cope with perhaps pursuing a new relationship. So I went onto a dating site, and eventually I met another solicitor. I don't know. I must have a thing about solicitors, which is over. However, I met this solicitor. I wasn't that bothered about dating him. And when he said, shall we meet again? And I said, yes, if you'd like. He was a little put out, because I suspect he thought he was such an amazing catch that I should be falling at his feet, prostrate on the floor. But he didn't know what I'd gone through. I didn't spend the entire time in the coffee shop explaining what I'd gone through. So I said, yes, okay, we'll go out. Anyway, I suspect he thought that was a challenge. I started going out with him. We met again, and for the first few months, he was really, really attentive, very sweet, very kind, as they are. And eventually, I was spending more and more time at his house near London. And because of that, it just seemed more convenient, actually, for me to move in with him. So I did. And as soon as I did, I noticed that, here's the thing, he always had a screensaver on his iMac and on his laptop. And what I did notice was that it was a picture of his old girlfriend. And he would say, you know, she was so beautiful. She was the most beautiful woman I ever went out with. So I just thought, well, you know, even if you're thinking that, it's not terribly kind for you to say that. But of course I didn't say anything. This went on for a long time. Then, I think it was just before Christmas. Now let me explain something. This man was always a person who never wanted to run out of anything. And I think this went as far as his girlfriends. When we would go to Waitrose shopping, if he already had, say, one bottle of sauce, he would have to get another. He would have to get a second bottle just so that he knew that he had some if he ran out. So what he was doing, once he got one girlfriend, he would start contacting the previous girlfriend and wooing her over the net. This particular girlfriend lived in South Africa. He would always tell me she was completely insane. But nevertheless, he was in contact with her. Now, I didn't know. So this is several months into this relationship, you understand, and it was just before Christmas. And I did notice that, I don't know if it's passive aggressive or what, but say if I went to bed at, say, 11, because I was tired by then, when he decided that he wanted to come to bed, he would put on the light. And obviously that would wake me up. But who does that if they care about somebody? I know that I would certainly never do that to my darling boy. You don't go and switch the light on deliberately and bang around if you care about somebody, but he would do this. So really, I should have taken notice and done something then, but I didn't. Then, just before Christmas, he said to me, I can't remember the exact words, but to the effect that he had been in touch, his ex-girlfriend had been in touch with him, and they had so much history together, and he wanted to give it another try. He owed it to himself and her to give it another try, and he was sure that I would understand. But also, I was just too much. To put it in his own words, and I do remember this bit. Imogen, you're like jam. Not everyone wants jam every day. Sometimes you just want bread and dripping. Now in England, dripping is the fat and the jelly that you get at the bottom of a roasting pan that you put into the fridge and jelly forms, and that is the beef dripping from a joint of beef. Well, he didn't want jam. He wanted bread and that sort of dripping on his bread. So clearly, I was out. However, he did give me his Bose sound dock. It wasn't even new. He gave me that for Christmas. And I must admit, I was a little bit put out. So I did nothing. I did nothing. There were no histrionics. There was no banging and smashing of plates. There was nothing. I left and I told my friend Sarah about it. And that was that. So this lady came over from South Africa for the Christmas period. He took her away. He took her to Paris. Actually, he'd taken me to Paris. But he'd taken her to Paris, to exactly the same hotel, to exactly the same restaurants. He was obviously using me as a tryout, I think. I suspect he didn't say to her in the lift, you look like you've got a beard growing all over your face. Well, I'm blonde. I was certainly very menopausal at that time. And I had this fine downy hair on my face. I mean, you couldn't see it unless you were actually in the correct light. And then you could see this fine down on my face. Well, he chose to tell me that in the lift of the hotel in Paris, which was kind of cruel, I think. I don't think I would have said that to him. That said, he took her to Paris. He took her to the same restaurant. And then it came to the time when he was dropping her off at the airport. And I kid you not, he texted me from the departure lounge about him dropping this lady off, and he would love to see me. Now, you would think, wouldn't you, that I would say, not on your life. But I didn't. I don't know why, but I didn't. But what I had done is read the book Stop Spoiling That Man. Now, I did say in my last video that book is very good for all relationships, whether it's your children, whether it's your friends, whether it's a man trying to work out why his girlfriend or female friends are behaving in such a way. It's really human nature. And, I had read that. So I went back to him with a better understanding of what his behaviour was showing me. When I went back, after a couple of weeks, he said, "Imogen, you've changed." Yes, I have. I can understand why you found me so over the top, so irritating. Frankly, I'm surprised you didn't do it before. When somebody is constantly nice to you, well, obviously that gets irritating. So yes, I haven't changed a lot, but I have changed a little. And he said, "Well, I liked the old one." So I said, "Well, I'm really sorry, but there's no going back. I've changed. And, well, you'll just have to deal with it, I suppose." So he said, "Well, you're not even looking through my emails." Well, actually, I wasn't in the first place, but there you go. He said, "You don't do that." So I said, "Well, no, why would I? Because if you're going to cheat, you'll cheat anyway. even if I were looking through your emails, which I'm not, but if you were, you'd hide them, you'd do something, you'd delete them. So what's the point? You're going to do it anyway. So I might as well let you get on with it. We carried on for a little while. And he was the sort of person that if he wanted something and couldn't find it, he would walk around his house banging and crashing and swearing and shouting, and it was just abominable. But I'd read that book. I'd found that person in that book. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to walk out of the room and go up to the top floor. It was a townhouse, so there were 2 higher levels than the ground floor. So I go up to the top floor and keep myself busy. I wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't say, oh, for goodness sake, stop screaming. Before, I would have looked for the thing that he'd lost, that he'd misplaced. But I stopped. I didn't tell him why I was doing it. I just stopped. And I suppose, he was an intelligent chap. And after a very short time, he said, why didn't you help me? And I said, well, I knew you'd find it. And he stopped. He stopped doing that once he realised that it wasn't going to get the reaction he wanted. So that was one thing. The other thing was that the poor soul lost his job. And his job was very high-powered in the city at a law firm. And I think it took away his sense of self. By this time, I had realised I'd made a mistake. Well, actually, before this time, I'd realised I'd made a mistake in going back to him. But when he lost his job, I thought, well, I can't leave now because that would be kind of cruel. And I may be lots of things, but I'm not cruel. So I thought, well, I'll stay until he finds another job. And then his ego will be fulfilled, he'll be fine again, and I can leave and not feel like I've dumped him in the lurch. So I did. I think a couple of months went past whilst he was going for interviews and seeking a new job, because he was, quite a bit older. Well, he was 10 years older than me, so I suppose he was 60s at that point. And he eventually found a new job. He'd found this new job. He obviously felt far more confident. He was no longer crying. And he felt good about himself. Then one day I had purchased something using his computer, his laptop, and it had come out of his Amazon account. It was a book on millinery, and this book was £6.28. Now, it's a nothing amount. I didn't realise it had come out of his account, but it did. And he found it. And he hit the roof. Absolutely hit the roof. Now, bearing in mind, I would buy things with my own credit card for his home, things like that, and not expect to be recompensed. But this £6.28, inadvertently purchased on his Amazon account, made him see red. He came downstairs. I had made breakfast. I was eating scrambled eggs on toast with brown sauce. And he said, did you buy so-and-so? Well, obviously I did. It was millinery. I had a millinery business at that point. And I said, yes, I did. Why? He said, it was from my account. That's theft. That's this, that's that. And he was really shouting at me. And I said, you are joking, aren't you? He said, no, get upstairs. Get upstairs. I pointed to the stairs, told me to get upstairs, a bit like my father might have done, but even he didn't do that. So I said, you are joking, aren't you? So he said, no, get upstairs. And at that point, I said, actually, I'll do far better than that. I'm leaving. So I did. I packed up my car with all my bits and bobs, and I left. I suspect he had one of his old girlfriends in the background that he wanted something from. He had stored things at my flat in my garage, and he needed to come at some point and collect them all because his house didn't have a lot of storage. So I didn't bother getting in touch with him, and a couple of months went past, and eventually he phoned me, and he came to collect all of his boxes. And he was being incredibly nice again. But this time, I definitely wouldn't go back. Now, this man must have been back onto the dating site because it very soon transpired that he had met somebody else, and he put that he was leaving London and going to move elsewhere in a university town, and that he had met the most wonderful woman and they were getting married. Now, he had asked me to marry him very early on in our relationship, and I said, yes, but I don't want a ring, thank you. I don't need a ring, and we'll see how it goes. Obviously, I had a lot of faith. Anyway, this lady of around his age, maybe a bit younger, really very beautiful. She did marry him, and he put all his wedding photographs on Facebook. I don't think that possibly they married and stayed married for very long, because his Mr. Nice Guy act would have run out by then. And when one of his dogs died, the one that I'd named, he emailed me and he said his dog had died. He thought that I would like to know because I'd named him. And he signed it Love, his name. And I thought, oh, and a kiss. And I thought, that is not his usual stance. He clearly wanted to resurrect something, and he was fishing. I was already married to my darling boy at that time. And I told him. And I said, clearly, I think his marriage is at an end, and he thinks that he can get back in my good books. So I replied, thank you. I am so pleased that you have your darling wife to support you in this very sad time, because obviously he hadn't said that he was no longer with her. I was only surmising, and he did reply, but he didn't mention my reply to him. And I haven't heard from him since. I'm sure you are banging your head on the wall, saying, do you never learn? Do you never learn by other people's behaviour? But actually, in the end, I did. Following that relationship, I was on my own for about 2 years again. And that was good. It was really good. I was happy. What I did want to do was sell my flat and move to Dawlish in Devon, because I'd found another flat there. I suppose it was more than a flat. It did have an upstairs. It was a 3-storey house, and the upstairs flat had 2 stories, one of which, the top story, would have made a beautiful artist studio overlooking the sea, so close that your windows would have gone wet from the pounding of the sea. And there was a railway line as well, and a little road. So I was looking forward to selling my flat and moving to Devon for a completely new life. I had accepted that I was more happy on my own. Life was good, and I was an introvert, so I didn't want to go out and meet people. I didn't want a wild social life. But the person I met next, well, that's another story. And if you have been, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.